One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. This is good. One, two, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2, 1, 2. You happy? Okay, no problem. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, hey, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey, hey, hey. 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, hey, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, hey, hey. 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey, hey. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Caramel vanilla jewel bar. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. No problem. Mike, are you busy right now?
What do you need?
Oh, they need the mic set up and gym lab. I've got all the cables.
I'll do the gym lab. You're right. You put it there now.
I've got all the cables and the mic.
No, no, I've got that to do now. I don't stop.
Where did you go? I've got the cables here.
So yeah, I mean it's
Lovely. If you want to just start chatting, it would be great. Thank you.
Okay, morning. Just checking sound. This all right? Checking 1, checking 2, checking 3. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Inshore Fisheries Conference 2018. Just had word that that's everybody in here and seated now. Good attendance. Glad to see everybody here. Fantastic turnout. This is our 5th conference now. Year on year, we've been getting greater attendance. We'll sense check the numbers, but we think this year will be a record year for attendance, somewhere in the region of registration at least, and with I saw a few faces who we hadn't seen on registration, which is always welcome, in excess of 160 people now with lots of interest for the workshops. So that's fantastic. Hoping the event today will be useful and interesting to both fishermen and wider stakeholders. We've got a broad range of people here today, both active fishermen and others interested, legitimately interested in the sector for inshore fisheries. And it's important that we listen to what you were saying in previous conferences. Following your feedback, we've made additional time available for the workshops so that you can really get into the nuts and bolts of some discussions. And we hope you'll take advantage of that and, really have some fruitful, I think there will be fruitful and engaging discussions at the 2 workshops. And it's really about a more active role for yourself as stakeholders. And this year, I'd like to thank in particular the CIFA, so if I get this right, I think that's the Community Inshore Fisheries Alliance, and also the Scottish Creole Fishermen's Federation, who are hosting 2 of the main workshops this morning and this afternoon. And I'm sure there'll be lively discussions at both of those. They're very interesting topics that have been picked. And it's always good to catch up with friends and colleagues. So for those of you who made our informal drinks reception last night, I hope you had a nice time. I hope you had a chance to do a little bit of networking. I met a lot of people I hadn't seen for a while, so that was good and gets us off to a nice start for today. But why we're here, really focus for us, our team, improving engagement and representation of the inshore sector. That's a priority for me as head of sea fisheries, and for the teams that I have in the inshore team. That's a real big focus for us, making sure that views and thoughts from the bottom, from the actual people doing the job and engaged, are filtering through everything that we do all the way through to policy decisions. Just as a default, I say this all the time when I meet people, when you speak to me or the team, you're in effect speaking to Mr. Ewan, the Cabinet Secretary. We feed back to him on a very regular basis, all of your views, concerns, hopes and aspirations. I believe, and I don't think there's any reason not to, that the future of inshore fisheries is a positive one. There may be some challenges and uncertainties. That's just, the way of fishing, actually, never mind the world. But it's important we all work together to make sure that we're heading in the right direction on this. And I'm quite sure the Cabinet Secretary himself will speak a little bit more about that in his speech. So I'm not going to talk too long because you didn't come here to listen to me, but I'll do a couple of domestics before I hand over to the Cabinet Secretary, who'll be taking the floor shortly. And following his speech, there will be an opportunity for some questions from the floor, a short Q&A. So start thinking now if you've got some things that you would like to ask the Cabinet Secretary. Let's not be shy. I've been to these events before and sometimes I struggle to get some hands up. So start thinking now and keep the Cabinet Secretary busy. After that Q&A session, leaving this area and going to the workshops, all in your badges. It'll tell you where you're supposed to be in the morning and where you're supposed to be in the afternoon. We don't trust you, but follow your badges and everything will go swimmingly. Lunch after the first round of workshops, again, up in the foyer where you had your coffee this morning and chance to catch up with friends and colleagues again. And then we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock back in the stage here where Jane McPherson and myself will be on stage, where Jane will lead a discussion on our future fisheries management, future catching policy, what Marine Scotland, under the direction of Mr. Ewing, are thinking about the needs of the industry going forward in terms of our future fisheries management strategy. So that hopefully be an interesting session, and Jane will be open to lots of questions. And then we'll close the day in the afternoon after the workshops, but the foyer will stay open until about 4 o'clock for teas and coffees for those of you who still want to take advantage of the networking opportunities. And finally, I'd just like to remind you that the Cabinet Secretary's speech, not mine I don't think, but the Cabinet Secretary's speech in the QA is going to be broadcast live via the internet and will be available for viewing after the conference. And just for general outputs, I hope you all take the opportunity to get the most out of today and contribute as much as you can to the discussions. This works best for us and you if you engage and have discussions. Different points of view I think are welcome, are positive. That's where we get the challenge, and that's where we can start working together and working through that. And we'll produce a short report. It won't be a huge thing, but we will produce a short report and some of the outputs and some of the key points that we pick up throughout the course of the day. And we'll publish that on Marine Scotland's website, and we'll make sure that all attendees, I understand you've all given your email contact addresses, you'll all be emailed that directly as well, and you can share them with your various colleagues and associations that you're with. So I think that is actually far more than enough. I think just with that, I'd just like to again welcome you all. Hope you have a fantastic day. I look forward to attending. I'll be attending both workshops myself, just to see how they're going, listening rather than intervening, I hope. And I hope you all do the same and have a great day. And no more from me. I'd just like to now hand over to Mr. Fergus Ewing, who's the Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Alan, for kicking things off. And perhaps I could just embarrass Alan a little bit by saying I'm very fortunate that I'm supported as the Minister for Fisheries by Alan and his team. And I know that they really work hard to do the very best for you all and travel around the country frequently in order to make sure that they're in touch with your views, your members' views. It's not for nothing that Alan is known in Brussels and amongst his peers as Mr. Fish, because he simply knows more about the negotiating aspect than possibly anybody else in Europe. So I'd like just to start off by thanking my officials. And also it's a real pleasure actually to be in my own constituency for a change in Inverness and welcome you here. And I gather some of you have enjoyed Highland hospitality last night in a moderate fashion. So you have said. I hope you get a chance to visit some of the local attractions and perhaps take a cruise along Loch Ness in one of Frida Newton's excellent Jacobite fleet, Jacobite cruisers, so that you yourself have the chance to spot Nessie. And somebody did ask me actually which way Nessie voted in. Yes, people do ask strange questions, not just fishermen, you know. Which way did Nessie vote in the Brexit referendum? And I said, well, we can't answer that, not because we don't know, because of course I canvassed Nessie myself, but because in fact, Nessie was a floating voter. I thought I'd start off with a groan, you know, in the hope that things will improve as we proceed. The theme of this year's conference asks us to consider how Scotland's fisheries should be best managed in future. And I've been clear from day one that my aim is to ensure that all fishing interests around our coasts and our communities benefit and all of us flourish, and that we create an environment that encourages sustainable and inclusive economic growth for our rural economy. So today I'd like to talk about our plans to take forward that aim of management of Scotland's inshore fisheries. But first, I'd just like to review the progress that we've made since last conference. The industry continues to go from strength to strength. We've seen encouraging investment across all sectors. The statistics released just last week, which many of you will have pored over, show that Scottish vessels landed some 466,000 tonnes of sea fish and shellfish in 2017, with a total value of £560 million. And this has been driven by a healthy 6% and 7% growth in the value of shellfish and demersal species, respectively, since 2016. As you know, we've strengthened existing management arrangements with legislation. We have new controls for the scallop, crab, and lobster fisheries, and daily catch limits for hobby fishers. And we've also issued guidelines for marking static gear this summer, and this will be followed by legislation next year. In addition, we're investigating local and spatial management with inshore fisheries pilots for Mull, the Outer Hebrides, and Arbroath. These pilots will help inform our future fisheries strategy by improving our understanding of the potential for fishers to come together and determine appropriate management for local fisheries. The ideal is local management, where people are working together and develop a consensus rather than imposition of solutions from Edinburgh. and the regional inshore fisheries groups continue to make good progress. I was pleased to meet with the chairs again last month to discuss their ideas for management improvements, and was pleased that government funding has been of some help. And I'm also working to improve the interaction between fisheries and other sectors, for example, renewables. I personally, as a result of some local cases that were raised with me, decided that I would meet with SSE myself, which we did on the 5th of September, really to emphasize that it's absolutely crucial that renewables and the fishing sector work together. I actually was the energy minister who consented the two main wind farms in the Moray Firth and indeed those off the east coast as well, including the one that Donald Trump didn't like. I was rather pleased about that, and that we thrashed him in court, but that's another story. That'll be the interesting bit for those watching the film. But to be serious, when I granted those consents, officials do most of the small print, but I was absolutely determined that one condition should be present in those consents, namely that the renewable developments have to work and coexist with fishing interests. You've been there for centuries. They've just arrived. There's room enough for both, but you must coexist. And I'm very confident that actually things are going reasonably well. And moreover, that there are far, far fewer conflicts in the Moray Firth area, for example, than there are off the south coast of England, where frankly, it's a bit of a bear pit. So I want to hear from you if there are any more difficulties, and I hope I've conveyed to you that this is something that I'm passionately interested in. The worst possible thing would be a conflict, a standoff, a feeling that you're not being listened to. And I just wanted to kind of depart from the text here just to make that absolutely clear. Now, catching fish and shellfish is just part of the picture. We've also got to sell it, and that's why I was very pleased to hear of recent progress being made to develop markets for Scottish langoustines and crab in Japan and continental Europe. The food and drink sector has a strategy to double the value of the total output of the sector by 2030 to £30 billion. We've got the fastest growing food and drink sector in Britain. We also have a team of in-market specialists doing their part by helping to deliver access throughout the world for Scottish seafood. I've met this team. I think there's about 11 to 13. They're based in places like California, New York, Berlin, Tokyo, Singapore. I met them myself. I wanted to hear from them what they are doing. And I must admit, I was extremely impressed. They are salespeople. They're effective. I know actually how much they've generated in terms of additional value. I can't mention that today because we're on film here and it hasn't been officially audited. But I can tell you they're doing a good job for Scotland. But there's much more that we can do because our seafood is prized and enjoyed all over the world. As well as looking after the marine environment, stocks and markets, we must consider the people who are working in the industry, and I'm very focused on personal safety as recent events continue to highlight the hazards of this occupation, as I scarcely need to tell anyone here. So I want to ensure that our vessels are safe to go to sea, stable and well equipped. And that's why I will ensure that future funding is prioritized towards safety issues. Now, unfortunately, when we leave the EU, assuming that that's what happens, we will lose access to vital funding streams such as EMFF, which have played a key role in funding critically important safety measures. The Treasury guarantee extends only to funding committed before 2020 under EMFF. So we do need clarity for the long term. I discuss these matters with Michael Gove and George Eustace on a sort of every second month. And the proposal, I believe, is that there should be a UK shared prosperity fund. And really all we know about that is those 4 words. The MFF has been worth around £150 million from the period of 2015 to 2020. And without that, work to ports and harbours, work to improve and upgrade the facilities for example, small processors and providing ice-making equipment, for example. Work in research, and I've met some young researchers here today who are based in Orkney, and also the work done by CIFIDS in St Andrews and other. None of this would actually happen if there weren't a funding stream for it. And therefore, it's essential, whatever the outcome, that we collectively argue for there to be a source of funding to do all these things and many more that I don't wish to cover simply because of time today. Now, despite our best efforts to get on with the day job, there are continuing uncertainties about what is going to happen in relation to Brexit. There are different views, of course, in Scotland and certainly amongst the fishing communities of Scotland. But whilst the current success of our seafood sector is undoubtedly due primarily to the hard work of the people involved, EU labour, funding and trade have, I would submit, also been successful contributors. Processing, for example, currently depends on EU labour for around 58% of its workforce, I think up to 70% in Grampian actually. And in spite of this fact, the UK government refuses to take account of this and continues to actively seek ways to decrease migration from the EU and beyond. And as the Rural Secretary in the Scottish Government, I can see more clearly than anyone else that without people that have come here from Lithuania, from Romania, from Poland, and other countries in the EU, voluntarily choosing to give us the fruits of their labour, choosing to spend their working lives here, without their contribution to society, I don't think the rural economy would function properly. Not only the economy in the private sector, but also the public sector and public services, the NHS, for example. And therefore, I think that for our point of view in our party, we are absolutely clear that that is a good thing, and any threat to that is something that we wish to avoid. Similarly, despite clear evidence, the refusal to recognise the benefits of the single market and customs union does dramatically increase the risk of hugely damaging tariff and non-tariff barriers being imposed after Brexit. And trade modelling research published in June of this year clearly showed that all plausible trade scenarios modelled would leave us worse off than as a member of the EU in respect of these aspects. So if the UK government is serious about a broad and deep relationship with the EU, they can achieve that by staying in the single market and a customs union. And this has been the consistent Scottish government position, which would avoid barriers to trade, such as customs delays and drastically increased certification requirements, which themselves would be causative of further delays. I've recently met with some of you and heard about your concerns for the future and the significant range of risks. I've been informed that, for example, a supply chain can have, shellfish can have a 3-hour window to work with in getting shellfish to market. So 3 hours could easily be lost even with minor delays, and therefore non-tariff barriers could be just as, if not more important than the tariff barriers themselves. And I think these are practical matters that we can all understand are real risks. The ongoing exit negotiations may have a direct impact on the upcoming end-year negotiations, to which our focus collectively is turning. And these are always challenging, but they may prove to be even more difficult this year, depending upon whether we're looking at a deal and a transition period or no deal at all. Many of these Brexit issues are avoidable, but there is a clear lack of will, I believe, and leadership from the UK government to tackle them. And I do remain deeply worried by the critical lack of detail on how they intend to protect Scotland's seafood sector from the dangers ahead. We will, however, continue to press hard to ensure that Scotland's interests are given the attention and respect they deserve by the UK government in the exit negotiations. I also want to say that if Brexit does happen, it's also my job to ensure that we get the very best outcome in respect of coastal state and control of waters without ceding access on a permanent basis. These are clear principles, and it's my duty to make sure that we get the best possible deal in any circumstance, whatever that may be, and I reiterate that today. Looking to the future in terms of fisheries management, we have an opportunity to review how we carry this out. So I want to develop a world-leading fisheries management for Scotland encouraging a whole supply chain approach and with all of your interests at its heart. And that means delivering for the needs and interests of Scottish fishing, including inshore, offshore, and onshore. It also means ensuring that the history, the cultural heritage of our fishing communities around our coasts is protected and supported to thrive in the future. So I will be launching fairly shortly a national discussion paper on how we manage Scotland's fisheries. But today I wanted to share some early thoughts with you about what form this new approach could take. Now, as you know, I'm committed to maintaining and respecting the current FQA system. However, if over time we are presented with additional fishing opportunities as a result of Brexit, and as I say, I'm determined that if Brexit happens, that is what must happen as well with it, then a fresh approach may be appropriate. We could, for example, share additional benefits wider than the current FQA holding mechanisms, directing a proportion of the additional quota towards supporting new entrants and inshore fisheries interests, along with associated licenses where appropriate. Opportunities could also be directed towards local communities and distinct geographical areas, with management of these opportunities being delegated to those actively involved in catching them. I recognise that not every area in the inshore may be ready now for additional opportunities or diversification, and this will involve a lot of discussion, of course, but that is not to say we can't take steps to develop the infrastructure and markets required. Turning to spatial separation, fishers in inshore waters continue to face challenges, not least competition for space. And I want to see values maximised and the needs of all sectors respected. As I've mentioned, we're piloting innovative management initiatives, including spatial separation. As technology and data on fisheries and habitats improves, that enables us to adopt a more tailored approach to separating mobile static activity, and many areas have no issues at all. In many areas, voluntary cooperation works well. However, as I've discovered from meetings and discussions with many of you over the past 2 years or so, in some locations we may wish to consider separation, and on scale this could differ from one location to another. It might be appropriate to test such an approach to assess the benefits or otherwise of areas dedicated to either trawl or to static activity, and fishers should be at the heart of designing this, and we must consider fairness in the round and fairness to all. In that respect, gear vandalism is also an issue highlighted, although the reality is there is wrongdoing, we believe, from only a relatively small number of mobile and static operators. However, so long as this persists, it does undermine the ability of law-abiding fishers to make an honest living, and also my ability to responsibly manage Scotland's fisheries. A simple and effective solution could be to suspend or remove the licenses from vessels in any sector that continually engaged in gear vandalism, and where that is demonstrated, of course, by incontrovertible evidence. That would be a strong approach to take, but it could remove the need for significant separation of competing sectors. It would be designed, after all, to be a strong deterrent. Funding will also be critical. I want to ensure that we focus on infrastructure across the supply chain to optimise benefits for the country, as infrastructure is where we can maximise revenues. If we're to have a modern and comprehensive and cohesive inshore fisheries management, then we need a strong scientific base with effective compliance to underpin it. We've done a lot of work already, and much work has been done across the board to improve inshore fisheries management. For example, with £2.3 million of research funding invested during the last 3 years. And that includes the £1.5 million CIFIDS project, the Scottish Inshore Fisheries Integrated Data System, led by the University of St Andrews. And I had the pleasure of meeting some of the team who are here, and they have their materials here at their stand, and I hope you have the opportunity to engage with them. And their work is investigating innovative technology and the use of automated systems on vessels to improve data collection, which can have a great deal of potential values in stock assessment, in safety, in regulating the location in order to have an evidential basis for any disputes which may arise, for example, with gear conflict or renewables. So better data systems will be an enabler, not a threat or a challenge. And the work that is being done, I'm satisfied by many experts in academia, is very useful indeed. And they also have people who work closely with you to make sure that the work is grounded on reality and proofed by the practical work that you do. So this project is exploring systems which will allow us to make a step change in data collection. Early results are providing a basis on which to consider how Scotland can initiate a cost-effective and world-leading inshore data collection system. The project finishes in spring of next year. I've heard much about great progress, and I'm keen to hear more about it in future. Building on this, new programme for government, which the First Minister announced a few weeks ago, highlighted the need to modernise inshore fisheries and introduce appropriate vessel tracking. So I'm therefore pleased to announce today that we will be investing up to £1.5 million to implement a vessel tracking and monitoring solution to enhance our reporting capability for the inshore sector. This will focus on two key aspects. Firstly, appropriate monitoring for the under 12 metre fleet, linked initially to activity around marine protected areas, where vessels with tracking equipment will be allowed within buffer zones. Secondly, we will explore the use of technology on a sentinel fleet to improve science. This investment will help us make better and more responsive management decisions and, as I said, improve interactions between fishing and other marine users. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm happy to take questions as Alan has signified, although I've already agreed with Alan that difficult ones will be directed towards him, and I'll deal with any easy ones that may arise. I'm sorry, I have to go and do a couple of visits, including to speak at the Crofters Federation in Rothes later, and a visit in between. I know some of you are crofters, so there we are, representing your interests in two ways today. It does mean I will not be able to stay for the rest of the session, which I apologise for, as I would have enjoyed doing that. But could I just say in conclusion that demand for Scottish seafood at home and across the world is very strong. It will continue to grow. People want our seafood, they value it, they treasure it wherever they are. There is a market. You will succeed in accessing that, and we will assist you in every practical way that we can. And finally, I take great pride that we have some of the most passionate, knowledgeable and determined fishermen in the world. It's a great pleasure working with you and being your minister. And my commitment to you is to champion your interests in the Scottish Government and in all the negotiations that will take place over the coming months. Thank you very much indeed for listening to me this morning. Okay.
Minister, have questions? I asked you at the start. We didn't have empty hands, so looking for the first question. If you just put your hand up, we've got roving mics. The lady over there. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Ewing. Thank you for that. There is a persistent rumour that you are considering opening up some MPAs we fought so hard for fairly recently to mobile and often destructive fisheries. Could you comment? And is this rumour true? Thank you.
Well, I must admit, I'm sort of blissfully unaware of an awful lot of rumours because I don't spend a lot of time reading social media where I think many of them emanate. But seriously, that's not a rumour which is any truth. In order to protect special features in the marine environment, that is the law. There is a legal structure with which I suspect you will be familiar. There is a process. That process, I want to stress, is based on evidence. And really all our decision making should be based on evidence. However, the important thing, in my view, is to, as I understand it, is to protect the feature PAs, not all of which is in the immediate curtilage of the specialised features. And really, one of the reflections that I was making during the course of my remarks is this: that the more we have better data about the location of fishing vessels, the more it is possible to prove beyond peradventure where every vessel has been, where every vessel has fished, and indeed to establish whether a vessel has impinged on a protected area or not, and whether the fishing effort is therefore legal or illegal. I think that's a great step forward, and one which, whatever your view about these matters, everyone should welcome. And therefore, I think increasingly that's a very clear example of how the use of science and the application of science can assist in the effective legal management of fisheries, but also the appropriate and due protection of the precious features of our marine environment.
Next question.
Andrew Whiston, St Andrews Inshore Fishermen's Association. Very nice to hear a politician speaking some sense. Thank you, Minister. Question, at the moment, the ownership of data is a bit tricky. For example, if a fisherman such as myself wishes to access my own Fish One data, I can. If I want to access the data for my members, I can't. And that makes our life very difficult when we're trying to argue with renewable companies or spatial separation. A high-level aspiration would be lovely if the Minister could reassure us that data collected, for example, with CIFIDs would be accessible to those who morally at least own the data. In other words, would you undertake to allow us to access the data if we required it to defend ourselves or our members, or basically to provide an evidence base? At the moment, providing an evidence base is very difficult. We can download plotter data. It's extremely expensive to do it. It's of dubious quality because we ourselves can edit it. It seems a huge opportunity out there for this new data, and it would be very nice, obviously within legal constraints, data protection and what have you, if that could be done.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I mean, it's a very sensible question, and I think in principle the answer must be yes. That the whole purpose of collecting the data is to establish various things, including the location of vessels, but not only that. I mean, also the location of particular fishing efforts. So it can also be used in order for purposes of stock assessment of stock for purposes of science and kind of ICES purposes. It can also be used for detecting the location of stock and improving your knowledge of where best to fish. And therefore, there are many purposes, but for the particular purposes that you identify, establishing a responsibility for any particular incident, whether it be gear conflict, whether it be alleged damage to vessel gear by renewables, whether it be for the purpose of safety, very obviously, then the access to that data is imperative. Now, I don't think that there should be a sort of public database of all of this. I think that would lead to the disclosure of the personal details of individual skippers and crew and their whereabouts of their vessel. So I think there is a need for some kind of limitation of the data for these personal privacy purposes. But for the purposes of assessing any dispute or issue, then I do think that there should be generally the availability of such data. And what I undertake to you, Andrew, is I think this is an interesting area where we should have further debate with the interests represented here today to make sure that we understand all the practicalities, but also that this money that we're investing in monitoring and tracking and the research which is being done by St Andrews and others will achieve its intended purpose. But at the end of the day, this data is a base of evidence. It's a base of evidence that will be valuable for a number of purposes. To be valuable, it has to be made available in some shape or form, subject to regulation, to make sure that it can achieve its intended aims.
Thanks, gentlemen. Most of us got time for a couple of questions. Anybody else?
Good morning. In concern with the data availability, it's great, and if it has to be used in a legal way for any purpose, but if you can simply turn the tracking devices off, what use is it?
Well, again, it's a question, I guess, of regulation. I mean, there already is, of course, regulation which applies to operating fishing activity. But I guess that regulation will have to determine the way in which the equipment is used, and as it should be used, probably at all times. I mean, if there is a requirement to have the tracking advice, then it really should be used. And moreover, I mean, just for the purposes of safety, I mean, the ability to track in real time the precise location of any vessel has perfectly obvious benefits in respect of safety in the event of any incident or potential incident, in order to be able to assure the attendance of rescue services and the swiftest evacuation. I mean, I used to be in a mountain rescue team, and, you know, get a call out, and very often you had no bloody idea where people were. No idea at all. Now, of course, there are pulsing trackers that people have, and mobile phones, and it's a different world. But the whole purpose of this is to improve safety, to improve operations, to improve your efficiency from a business point of view, and to limit the possibility of conflict and difficulties with different fishing interests and other interests. So, I really don't think, you know, having it and keeping it turned off is a particularly sensible option. But, you know, I'm talking out loud here, which is always a bit of a difficult thing for ministers to do, particularly when you're being filmed, I have to say. Although I'm not sure the viewing figures will be absolutely enormous. But be that as it may, I'm happy to, and I'm keen to engage with you all. And I think this is something that we will no doubt discuss with the inshore fisheries groups, with the SFF and others, because, you know, we want this regime to be a friend, not a foe. We want it to be something that you value, not fear, and something that is not a liability. And to get that right, obviously, since we're introducing this system and we're funding it, we need to make sure that through discussion we achieve these aims based upon evidence of what you do in practice.
Good morning. To protect the inshore fisheries, is there any plans after Brexit if we're going to be lifting a 12-mile line to protect by the inshore fishery?
Well, that's something that we will have to consider with you more carefully. There are obviously differing views about all these things, and we have to take into account all views. We have no immediate plans to do that. I'd be interested to hear your views on that in future. I mean, our overall aim is to ensure the success of all fisheries, and that means that the approach that I've outlined in respect to fisheries management, I think, is the correct one to take. But I'm very happy to take that offline with you and discuss that further.
Time for one last question. If anybody wants to start on the top left, gentleman in the
Cabinet Secretary Derek Carner from the Scottish Fishermen's Federation. It was really good to hear you say in your speech that you seem to have come to a point as a government that fishing safety and the protection of fishermen is really important. For a long time now, we've focused on the species, which is right and proper, but focusing on the people that are doing the job is important. So really, have you got anything else to share on how you plan to do that? And from SFF, a real request to be involved with your officials if you're serious to improve safety in the fishing industry in Scotland.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say that myself and all my predecessors of every party have had an acute awareness about the perils of the sea, the dangers. We've seen a number of tragic events over just the recent decades, and we're acutely aware of this. And therefore, I totally agree with you that, Derek, that this is something that's absolutely essential that we deal with. I've covered one aspect of it today, but there are many other aspects. Many of these are really practical matters for yourselves as working fishermen to do in terms of practical safety strategies and measures to ensure the safety of skippers and crew. But the sea is a cruel place, or it can be a cruel place. We all know that. And therefore, myself and my officials are always determined that to do anything more that we can conceivably do. I'm hoping that the announcement that we've made today will play a small part in improving safety, but that's just one issue. And finally, the announcement, the statement I made today about ensuring that future funding is directed towards safety of vessels, of stability and so on, is something which I think is overdue and requires specific attention. And of course, we know that the MCA has a particular wealth of knowledge and examination of events, sad, tragic events over the years. So, you know, I'm happy to pledge to you that along with working with the SFF, with really all of the fishing representatives around the coast of this country, safety is an absolute priority. And if you think that there are other matters which we should be doing that we're not, then please do let us know, do let Alan and the team know, because we would want to work with you to do everything we can to tackle what has been really one of the most serious issues, re safety of any part of the economy in these islands.
Okay, thank you, Captain Secretary. As Mr. Hugh mentioned, the other engagements, and we're now past time. Thank you very much. I think actually finishing on safety, whilst not the somber, actually is a very permanent reminder of the challenges and the risks that everybody takes. Because we see delivered a fantastic product that we have here today, we should never forget the efforts of all our fishermen in that process. So thank you, and we will now move on to the workshop sessions. I'll ask any applause, please. Thank you very much.